Well, I grew up in the hills of Tennessee. It was a suburb of a large city, but it still had a very small town sort of feel. And my father, he had a very, very large physical family. He was one of 9 siblings, and he was second to the youngest. And so it was definitely a clan. And we did all sorts of things together. My uncle owned a campground, and we would go to this campground multiple times a year, and we would just do all sorts of crazy stuff. We would go hiking, we would go rappelling, we would go whitewater rafting. We just did all sorts of things together. I mean, we had our own rappelling equipment. We had our own whitewater raft, and lots of crazy things would happen. So I grew up just very, very close to a lot of people, and most people would say I had a very, very good family life. And we were also religious. We grew up just a mainstream denomination. Now, a lot of the other relatives, not all of them were of the same brand as we were. They seemed to disagree about that. On the one hand, we were part of a mainstream denomination that, you know, it needed to be this way, and this is right, and this is the only way to salvation. But on the other hand, there were all these relatives, and even though we disagreed with them, it was still okay somehow. We're supposed to be okay. So I was being taught that some of these things were salvation issues, yet they didn't ever act on any of these things. Meaning we would still do all the fun things together, and we would still go on even if they had a disagreement about religion. We were raised as if religion was important. And you know, it's in my baby book that I was, you know, taken to Sunday services when I was 1 week old, and I hadn't missed a service since unless I was sick. You know, we did every Sunday morning, every Sunday night, every Wednesday, every time the doors were open for something, we were there. My immediate family, and also some of the other, my father's, my aunts, uncles, you know, they went to the same congregation. So, and we were somewhat of the core group of this congregation. So we were expected to be there, and I was taught to read my Bible and to pray, and that those were right things to do. And I did. And this was my upbringing, and that was what I was taught to do. In reading my Bible, God became very real to me. I believed He was a real person. I believed, and because prayer was talking to Him, that's what I was told, prayer is talking to Him, and I believed He was a real person, it was very real to me. And when I would speak to Him, I would speak to Him like a person, as a child. As I began to believe that God was real and talk to Him as a real person, I became more and more just wanting to belong to God. And I could see things in my heart that were not like God. Sin, I could see sin. I knew it was sin. Just I would lie, and just I would be jealous. Just all the things that even little children, I didn't want to share my things, just no matter what it was. And as I got older, and I'm 11, 12 years old, and I could see the tendency toward vanity and just in comparison with other girls. And I didn't like being in trouble, so I lied a lot if that would get me out of trouble. And I felt very guilty. And I would sit in the pews with everyone else and listen to what was being said and sing the songs. And I just wanted to belong to God. I wanted to be His, and I wanted the sin to be gone. And I knew all those things were a violation, that was enough to send me to hell, that I didn't have to do anything else bad, you know, really bad. It wasn't like there was some scale for me, you know, I'm not that bad. You know, I did have a realization that any sin separates me from God, and I have sinned, and I do sin, and I need God. And I was baptized when I was 12, and even though there were a lot of things I didn't know as far as what church really was, and just all that God really had for people and everything that lordship meant, I did believe that Jesus was God's Son, and I believed that I was supposed to obey God, and I set off on that course when I was 12 and when I was baptized, and started walking with Him and talking with Him in a real way. And I would lay in my bed at night and just just talk to him about all sorts of things. And I started combining reading my Bible with talking to him. So I'm talking to him about the things I'm reading in the scriptures. And I'm starting to see things that even as a young person that don't make sense to me, as far as what church is, the way that people treated God, even things related to my family, as far as they were saying, this is the way to God, this denomination, this congregation, this is what's right, this brand of Christianity is right. Yet there was this contradiction where, you know, I had aunts and uncles and cousins doing other things, and why was that okay? And so I started just looking for truth myself in the scriptures of what does God say? What does God think? God, I want to know you. I want to belong to you. I want to know what you think about these things. I was a child that didn't sleep very much for whatever reason. And I would just talk to God for hours. That's my recollection of laying in bed and just talking to God for hours about these things. And then a short time after that, I started seeing friends who are older than me and people in the congregation falling away from God or being in sin, just being in sinful situations. And I would hear adults talk about it. And they would talk about it in the sense of, oh, they're just sowing their wild oats. They'll come back. Or it's okay, they're just being a teenager. And I wasn't a teenager yet. And I thought, is this gonna happen to me? God, is this gonna happen to me? I don't want this to happen to me. I love you. I want to be yours. I want to keep belonging to you. And so I got pretty serious, and I was just about this. I was very concerned about this as far as what I was seeing around me in the teenagers' lives and what I was hearing from them and the way that the adults handled the situation. It just seemed inevitable that this was going to happen to me. So I started asking God, please take my life. Just let me die here in bed right now. You know, this is, you know, I'm 13 years old and I'm just asking God, like, I don't want to fall away from you. I don't want to become like this. I don't want to become like them. So if this is inevitable, if that's inevitable, please take me now, because I just want to go home. I just want to go home and be with you. I don't want that for my life. And I continued this prayer, and I got worried because I was still living. So I'm still living, and all throughout junior high, I tried to maintain my relationship with God. I was, of course, meeting new friends. So I was trying to stay in with good crowds, trying to make the right choices, to be with the right people. But I would say that it wasn't until I started high school that things really sort of took a turn. I had a friend that was older than me. She was 4 years older than me, and she was, I was in between junior high and high school, and she was between high school and college. And I just really looked up to this girl. To me, she just had a great reputation. She was a good Christian. She didn't drink, she didn't smoke. She just kept her reputation intact all through high school, and she gave me hope. Like, if she can, you know, she made it through high school, and I'm starting high school. If she made it through high school, then I can make it too. And so I had this ray of hope because of this friend. And so it's the summer before she starts college and before I move up to the high school. And she starts a job, and she goes just off into the world, maniac, worldly, terrible reputation. She just falls off the deep end spiritually. And everybody knew it. Within the first week of high school, I was there, and I overheard two people talking about this friend of mine. Like, she was so good in high school, she had the best reputation, and now and all the things they'd heard about her. Now, this was a school that had each graduating class was about 200, so it's not that small. And here is this friend of mine that I just sort of idolized and looked up to. She was my hope in this situation, and now she's fallen. It happened to her too. And I was just devastated. That just blew it for me. I'm not gonna make it. If she couldn't make it, she was better than I was. I'm definitely not gonna make it. And I even went as far as to have lunch with her and talk with her. And I said, what are you doing? What are you doing? And she said the same thing I'd heard so many times. She said, I'm just gonna sow my wild oats for a while. I'll come back to Jesus. I'm just gonna sow my wild oats right now. I didn't have any way to help her. I tried to talk to her even, and I didn't have anything else I knew what to do to help her, and it just hurt me. It really hurt me deeply. Within a couple of weeks of that, my parents went out of town, and I let it slip to one of my friends. Oh yeah, my parents are out of town this weekend. What happens, the person that I said it to, the friend I said it to, told everyone. And all my friends were showing up at my house. My parents were gone. They're bringing alcohol, and they're just flooding in, doing all sorts of filthy things. And I am just trying to manage the situation. I'm trying to be cool. I didn't want to lose my friends. I didn't know what to do. The best I could do at the time, I thought, was I collected everybody's car keys so that no one would drive home drunk. And so I was still trying to I'm just playing it safe, but inside I'm just devastated. I'm just torn to pieces. And everybody leaves, and I was in the band, and we had a band competition that next day, and that next day I was just sick. I was just indescribably sick, and people are, what's wrong with you? What have you got, a stomach bug? And I can't even describe to you how bad I felt, but the sin of it all was just tearing me. It was just tearing me to pieces. But I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know who to tell. I didn't tell the truth about what had happened to my parents or anybody else. I just kept on going. Well, as time went on, week after week, more things like that continued to happen. I didn't know how to stop them. It did just feel like a snowball. The next thing you know, I'm taking a drink. I'm lying to my parents. I'm starting to date men, not boys. I'm dating men, 7 years older than me, and just sneaking into bars, just one thing at a time. I just opened the door, and I hated it. I was tormented through every step of it. Those sweet conversations that I had as a child, those disappeared. My life with God became this hating sin, asking Him to forgive me, promising I would never do it again. I wanted free from what was happening, but it was just a snowball that I didn't know how to stop. I mean, I was drinking. I didn't have a lot of access to alcohol, but when it was in my face, it was like I was instantly addicted. The first time I had some, it was like I became instantly addicted to it, and I could drink a lot of hard liquor really fast. And I didn't even necessarily feel an effect from it, but there was something addictive about it for me. And I'm 16, 17, 18 years old, and I'm feeling like I'm on a path toward being an alcoholic. I am in all sorts of trouble, and here I'm supposed to be picking a college. And I didn't know what direction to go. I was very, very involved in the music programs. I played multiple instruments. Music just came naturally for me. I enjoyed it. I was pretty good at it, and I excelled in most of the things that I played. I'd pick up another instrument and learn it and play in different bands and things. So by the time I was a senior, I had a lot of scholarship opportunities. I could pretty much go to any in-state university that I wanted to on a full scholarship. My band director had told me that, and I was just planning on picking one. But I hadn't really settled down to pick one because I just knew where I was going to end up. And I didn't know I just didn't make the decision. And so I had all these people sort of asking me, what are you going to do? My band director's coming to me, what are you going to do? Just tell me where you want to go and I'll work it out. And I just kept sort of putting him off. And then the idea came up for me to go to this Christian university. I don't even remember how it came up, but I thought, maybe I'll just try this. Maybe it will work. Maybe there will be some people there. Maybe I will meet somebody and get in with the right crowd. And maybe, just maybe, I'll make it. And this was just a big thing for me all through high school. On my class ring, I put a cross on my class ring. And I put it there to remind me, because I was sure I'm going to fall off the deep end by the time I reach college, just like this friend of mine did. So I'm going to put a cross on my class ring to remind me that that's not who I want to be. One thing about the Christian college, and I think it was You think that I would have considered that more deeply from the beginning. Well, why don't you just choose a Christian university and that'll give you better chances? It seems like that would be an obvious choice. Well, one of the reasons I think it wasn't an obvious choice for me is because, one, this friend went to the local Christian university, and I knew all the terrible things that happened there. And plus, my experience was the youth group at the congregation that I was part of, and everything else, every other youth group thing I had ever been or done, those were the worst influences in my life. The worst things I ever heard, the nastiest things I ever heard, all were in these religious things, these groups, and the worst things were happening there. So I didn't view that as any sort of, in general, I didn't view that as any sort of help whatsoever, because I knew what those things were made of. And so to me, they were all the same. But I think my parents had just wanted me to try out this university, and they had some auditions for scholarships set up for this university. And so I started practicing for the auditions. I went, and this was outside the state that I lived in, so no one there knew me as far as honor bands and being part of all-state band or anything like that. So I was starting from ground zero, whereas the state schools I wouldn't have even needed to audition really. So I went to the auditions, and we pull up onto the campus, and I am looking for the music building. I can't find it. There's this big building over to one side, but it's just not in the right place. And I'm used to music buildings being very large, auditoriums and practice rooms. And finally we find on the map the music building, and it's this little bitty building that's about the size of a house. And I looked at that building and I said, I'm not going here, Mom. I'm not going to this school that has no, this is not going to help my music. This is not going to happen. And she said, come on, just go ahead. We drove all this way, just do the audition. You don't have to go here if you don't want to. So I go through the auditions and we go home. But I say, I'm not going there. And that night I got a phone call and I had a full scholarship. They called and said that I would have everything paid for if I would come there. And I started thinking and praying and asking God, is this my chance? Is this a door for me? Are you opening this for me? Will you please let me meet someone that will help me? I want to make it. I want to make it. And so I signed up. I said I would go there. I registered and I went to this Christian university. It didn't take me long to see that it was really made of some of the same stuff that I knew youth groups to be made of, and that I knew the local Christian university to be made of, that there's just a lot of sin and terrible things. A lot of people are just there because their parents make them go there. It doesn't have anything to do with Jesus and wanting to be a Christian at all. But I did still continue to ask God to bring someone into my life that would help. Once at college, I did think that as far as what my plan was, I had a double major. And I had the major of music, and I also had a major of I wanted to be a missionary. So I had music and missions majors, and that was what I started college off as. And pretty early on, I met one of the young men there who was also a missions major. A couple weeks after just meeting him and sort of knowing him casually, I saw him in the lunchroom of the school cafeteria thing. And I said, hi, how's it going? How's your major going? I just asked him, and he said, oh, I've completely dropped all that. I've just found something more, that God wants more and has more. And I was just, whoa, what are you talking about? Really, when he said that though, when he said, I found something better, that God has something better in mind than this whole missionary thing, this missionary idea. And really, when he said it, I thought, I gotta know what you're talking about. And we were really just sort of passing each other in the lunchroom. And I said, I gotta know what you're talking about. And that was all. We had this interchange, and I don't even remember how then. But shortly after that, he introduced me to people that he was with. They together had been forming just daily relationships. We were just talking about Jesus all the time. And it just began to grow just more and more, where we were just talking about the things, what God actually said in the Bible as far as what church was supposed to be, that it was supposed to be a family, that we were supposed to watch each other's backs, and even more importantly, that it was supposed to matter, that it was really, really supposed to matter. I remember talking about in Matthew 16, just where it talks about, where Peter says, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God, you're the Messiah. And that Jesus said, on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. And everything I had seen growing up, hell was winning. Hell was winning. Church didn't even matter, except church was just something that you attended. It was something that you did, and you knew church as people. But church didn't really have an effect. Other than church being something that you attended, it really didn't mean anything anymore to me than that. But when you're looking at things in the scriptures about what church is, you all of a sudden start to see that church is supposed to matter, that it means something to God. And the things that you see in the scriptures as far as what church is, it's the body of Christ. It's a kingdom of priests, saints of God, the things that Jesus said that the gates of hell would not prevail against the church. And that just started flooring me. Like, there is something, church means something, that it's not just something that I attend. It's not just something that I do. Church somehow plays a part in all this. And we just began talking about it all the time. We would go to our classes, and then we would just meet in the lunchroom right after classes. We'd meet at people's houses, people who had houses, and we were together every day. We're watching each other's backs. We are just asking each other, how are you doing with these things? And just talking about Jesus. And for the first time in my life, I realized this helps. This is helping. This is what life is supposed to be like. And I'm not supposed to do everything on my own. Church is supposed to really matter. And it was the best thing. It was just the best thing in my life. With all these just things dawning on me, as far as just God opening our eyes to what church really was. Also, I was thinking of all those years growing up, and I had this sort of revelation from God that it does not have to be that way. This whole thing that I heard all growing up, that teenagers just sow their wild oats, that's just the way it is. It has to be this way. It's okay. They'll come back to church later on. This whole thing that I had heard, all these excuses for sin and wickedness and for falling away, for lukewarmness that God said He hated, all these things were not the way it was supposed to be, and they did not have to be that way, that things really could be different. And I remember looking at this other brother and saying, these things mean everything. This means that we can have children that do not have to live the sin-wrecked lives that we have lived. They can stand on our shoulders and have something different. They can start from a totally different place because they don't have to fall into the same things that we fall into. This church can really matter, and it can really make a difference in people's lives. And who can we become? I mean, I started looking out into the future. Who can we become if our children, if the next generation and the generation after that, if we can obey God and put into practice the things that He says in the scriptures about what church is and walk in His ways, then we can move forward and keep moving forward and not have to just be weak, wimpy, barely surviving. If you survive at all, we don't have to be that way. And Jesus, we started talking about that the church, in the scriptures it talks about the church being prepared for the return of Christ, that the church can actually usher in his return. And I started to see if this can really happen, this can really be that way. I can see how this can unfold, because we don't have to, everybody doesn't have to start from the same starting place. And because of that, we can grow from glory to glory to glory and be more and more like Jesus through the decades. We can be more and more like Jesus to the point where he wants to come back and get his bride. And that was an awesome thing. So that was my freshman year of college. And when springtime came, it was time to consider what to do, because I'd been a part of this church who were walking in obedience to Jesus, having a biblical faith and walking in biblical ways as far as what Jesus said church was and what our lives were supposed to be. And now I've got a decision to make. I was living in the dormitory, and another sister, we shared a room, and we were both part of the same church. And growing up, we lived in the same city, even though we didn't know each other before. But we were trying to decide what to do. Should we go home to the city where we grew up in Tennessee? Should we go home, or should we stay with these believers? And we did think maybe we should go home, what we called home, even though the home in our heart was changing. And I think part of the decision was based on that we owed it to our parents to explain to them some of the things that was happening in our lives. And so that was part of the decision. And it wasn't flippant. So when the sister and I went back to Tennessee for the summer, one thing that we'd planned to do was to get a job working together. And the reason that we wanted to do that is because we had seen the value when we were at the university and when we were a part of this church. We realized that there was great value in sticking close to each other, actually being there, just on a daily basis, being there for each other. We would have meetings where the whole church was together, and we would read the scriptures, and we would talk about Jesus, and we would pray, and we would sing and worship. And those things were food. That was like the full course meal, having food for your spirit. But the times of us just being together, just doing things together, work or whatever, was also food. That those times were also food. It might not have been the full course meal, not quite the same thing as far as just teaching and places to put your feet on in that regard, but it did really mean something, and it did feed us on a daily basis. It was like being fed intravenously throughout the day. And so we found value in doing things together. So we set out to get a job together. We were looking at a daycare, and she got the job and I didn't. And we didn't know what to do. We spent a couple of days looking around, and we made an almost fatal error at that point. We decided that there's nothing we can do. We tried to get a job together, but we couldn't. So we'll just work separately. And she started the job at the daycare, and I got a job answering phones for some vacuum cleaner sales people or whatever. I would say it was sort of part one of a weakening, taking this job by myself, the only Christian in this workplace. I was one of two ladies in the whole office. It was a whole office full of men, a younger female in an office full of very aggressive salesmen. I don't know that I really realized at the time that I was just putting myself in an unwise situation. Within the first day or two, a guy from high school started working there. And that was sort of the door back into high school relationships that I had. I thought that I owed it to them. And maybe I did on some level, but the way that I went about it, I thought that I owed it to them to try to explain to them the changes in my life. And so when he asked me to go out, and they were all getting together for dinner, and I went with them. I did try to tell them about what happened in my life and things like that, but there was something that happened when I saw them. There was a seed. There was a seed that happened. And I decided that I wouldn't see them again after that unless I had a really good reason. I could feel the wrongness of it, and so I sort of shut the door on those relationships. But in my heart, there was still something happened that I went off with these old friends by myself. And so I'm in the same old situations, and I start feeling just the weakness. And it wasn't long after that I did shut the door on that. Like I could see that this is wrong and I'm shutting the door on this. And then it was like Satan said, well, what about this? And opened up this door that I had not really dealt with and I didn't even really know. But enter into my life Mr. Perfect Right. This image of this person, he had all these characteristics that I thought I wanted in someone. He was the manager and one of the bosses there at the place where I worked, and he was over a region and he had flown in and he started showing interest in me, and he started out where he wanted a ride somewhere and stuff like that, and I just started falling for it. And like I said, the weakening had already started, and he was just treating me really nice and just, we could do this. You could move with me to this city and we could do this and we could do that and we could travel. And I had already just started going downhill. There was something with those seeds, with those friends, where the worldliness and the pulls and wanting to be loved, something had dug in. It wasn't like I was hiding the things from the people that I was walking with daily. I wasn't hiding the temptations, and I was telling them all along the way. But I could tell there was a fish hook. There was a fish hook in me, and I was falling, and I was falling fast in my heart. And things were happening where I was deciding. This man had asked me to move with him to another city, and it was tempting to me. It was tempting, and I thought, I started having some of those same old so all the stuff I've been talking about from school, see, it's for other people, but not you. Other people can. But part of the fish hook was that, that was hard. Part of the fish hook of the whole thing were all those seeds I had planted, that Satan had planted as a child of the you can't make it, you're different, you're the worst of the worst. So all these things you've been talking about at the university, that's going to work for other people, but it's not going to work for you. See, you haven't even been home and back in the middle of the real world. Look where you're headed. And I just started thinking, okay, well, it's just, maybe it is inevitable for some, maybe me. And I mean, I was just really tempted. And then a couple of things happened where I had an accident in my car. And I ran out of gas, and it was just like God was saying, wait a minute, I'm still here. When I'd be on the edge of making the wrong decision, something would happen, I'd run out of gas or wreck my car and just slow me down. And I made the decision of, God, no, I'm coming after you. I see. I remember I was actually with this guy, and I looked at him, and it was just like, I see what you are. I see what you are. You are Satan's last-ditch effort to have my soul, and you will not have it. God will have my life. And I decided that day, I am God's. I will not go this direction. I'm going after God, and that's all I'm doing. I saw the situation for what it was. Like, this is a child of the devil extending his hand to me. And I looked at this man and I said, no, I'm living for Jesus. I'm a Christian. This is what my life is about. And I mean, he looked at me. It's just total shock. Like, you're kidding. No, nobody stands up for those things. Come on. Why can't you just come with me? And I explained to him, no, that's not what my life is going to be about. And so I made that very clear to him. There was still something in me. It wasn't all resolved. And I spent a night just crying out to God. And I really felt like he just pulled me up in his lap and just let me cry, just as a complete failure with no hope in myself at all. He just pulled me up in his lap and told me that that we'd make it. And after that point, something really did change. After that point, there were certain areas, specifically as it related to romance and all that stuff, that is just so prevalent in our society and in our hearts, wanting to be loved. After that night of sorrow and really just putting my life in His hands, I never struggled with that again. It was gone. And the next day I went into work. I quit that job. I knew that I had to sever ties and that I needed to make changes, that I needed to build wisely. And one of the things that was really key for me at that point was I just really saw all the things that I had learned the past year as far as what church was, that this was a supernatural thing. And it's not, I had people around me, I had friends, Christians, that I was seeing even every day, but it wasn't the same as a church, a lampstand, an ecclesia, that the gates of hell don't prevail against, that there's something very supernatural and unique about that. And there's something very special about gifts, anointed gifts that God places in His church that gives wisdom and protection. And I knew I needed that. And so I quit that job. On the way out the door, I was carrying out all my stuff, and the other lady that worked there ran after me, and she said, "I want you to know you made the right decision." I couldn't say anything in there, but that guy was really a creep, and he's been lying to you all along. And she listed all these things that was the truth. So it more just confirmed things. Not that it really changed anything, because it wasn't about him anyway. It was about me. And Satan was tempting me just based on my own flesh, and it really didn't have anything to do with this guy anyway. I saw something really important at that time too, related to giftedness and leadership. And that because I had these two or three friends in the same city as me, and we were with each other often. We were reading and we were praying and we were talking to each other, but I was missing certain gifts in my life. I was starting to see that 2 or 3 people who all believe the same things is not the same as a church. That a lampstand, church, ecclesia, the community of God, all those things that we were talking about was a spiritual matter. That there was something special and unique about God's stamp on a lampstand in a church. And I had been a part of one of those at the university, but I was not a part of one in this city where I was. I understand that not everybody has that opportunity to be a part of a lampstand, but I did. And I saw the effect that it was having on me not to have one. And I only knew of 2 churches on the planet at that time. And meaning true biblical churches, people walking in Acts 2 life. I only knew of 2 places where that was happening. And there was one in the city where the university was, and there was another one in another city that I had never lived. I did know some of the people in the other city, and so I decided that I would move there because the leadership was stronger, and I knew it was stronger, and I knew that I needed help. A lot of people at the college where I had the church that I was a part of at college, they were younger, and I knew that I needed some maturity, that I needed some wisdom, I needed some parenting, that I needed help, and so that's why I decided to move there. So I went to my parents and I said, I'm 19 years old, I'm moving, I'm leaving. And I told them why. I need a lampstand, I need gifts. God gave gifts for the edification of the church. The Ephesians 4 gifts He gave for a reason, and I need those gifts in my life. I remember that my mother was saying things to me like, you just want to live on the mountaintops and life has some valleys. That is so wrong. That is so wrong. And that's the very thing that I was learning, because I had told them some of the sins I was falling into, that it does not have to be this way. And it is wrong for us to keep making excuses for our weak, sinful situations as if it's inevitable, as if it's God's fault, or as if it's God's desire for His people, for His church. It is time to stop doing that. And I told her I'm leaving. I can't tell you and explain to you all the reasons why, but I'm going. And she said, Well, I'm just telling you that your father is ordering you to stay, and the Bible clearly says that children are supposed to obey their parents, and he is telling you, you may not go. And I looked at her and said, I'm going. And I've never regretted that decision. It was pivotal as far as realizing that a church was a unique thing, that this is a supernatural, that church is a supernatural thing, and I need one. I can't just know in my mind what church is and believe all the right things about church. I can't just change my beliefs. I have a chance to put myself in the middle of a lampstand, and I'm going to do it. And people would say, why can't you just work in the system? All these thoughts and ideas and these things that you're saying, that God is saying, we see them in the scriptures. So stay where you are, work within the system. And I would just look at them and say, I can't, because it's a supernatural issue. And plus, I am becoming and have become a part of a family. And now you're asking me to move back to an orphanage? I'm becoming a part of a people who are living out Acts 2 daily together, having all things in common, just working together and loving and reading the scriptures together and praying and becoming more and more like Jesus, actually changing. And you're asking me to step back into this world that's been killing me? Sorry, can't do it. So I put all my stuff in the car and I drove to that other city that very next day. In fact, I drove overnight and I showed up on one of their doorsteps, didn't even tell them I was coming. It was one of the best decisions I've ever made, and it was the right one. When I made the decision to move from my parents' home, one of the things that came up was people would accuse. They would say, you're just following after man. You're just looking for a movement. You just need to stay where you're at, bloom where you're planted, and be faithful where you are. But the thing was, I had seen godly leadership. I had seen true church. I had seen people putting into practice and obeying God. You can't turn around and accuse someone of following a man or being a part of a cult just because they're looking for biblical church, biblical leadership. All those things are in the Bible. Looking for spiritual parenting and mentors, looking for people who really cared and were willing to obey. And to this day, I look back and I just say no. I make no apologies for following Jesus. Jesus lives in people and he places his gifts. Anointing is real, anointed gifts. The fact that God gives gifts to the church for the edification of his body, that is solid footing. And I make no apologies for recognizing that, and that is following Jesus. One of the conversations that I had with my parents later, after moving, that I tried to give them a picture of why these things really mattered. And there were certain things that Jesus said that we just need to take him at his word on. And if we build in ways that where just anything goes, the way that they had taught me to build growing up, where they would say that these things mattered, they would say, this is the right thing, this is the right thing, this is the wrong thing. But other relatives did this thing or that thing, and they didn't ever act like it mattered. And so they taught me that it didn't matter. And one of the things that we talked about is my father's really large family. Most of his brothers were builders. They were masons, stoneworkers. They built a lot of things in the area where we lived, and they were known as good masonry workers. And they would tell stories where the oldest brother, my uncle, had taught them how to build and how to have a standard. And they would tell stories of how when he was teaching them, they'd build something and they'd think it was pretty good. And he'd come up and say, this is terrible, this is shabby, and he'd knock down the thing that they were building. He would just knock it down and say, start over. My name's not going on that thing. Because he was the oldest, and the company that he started, they worked under him, and it had his name attached to it. His name was the company name. And he would say, my name's not going with this thing that you just built. Learn to build it better. And he taught all the younger brothers how to build, to where their reputation became that they were good builders in the area. They were good stoneworkers. So one of the things that I talked to my parents about after after I moved was, you're treating God as if he's a bad builder. God cares about how his house is built. He said that his church is his house. He cares about the way that he says it's supposed to be built. You have a way that you want to build when you're just building a little, house or store on the corner. You have a standard. Why do you think that God does not have a standard? Why does anything go? You think that anything goes with God, but that's not true for you. That's not true for your building company. Anything doesn't go because your name is attached to it. Well, his name is attached to his building, his church. So he cares about how it's built. And he has a way. There are certain things that he says in the scriptures that you're not obeying. Even simple things like people having titles. This is very clear in the scriptures that men are not to have titles and what leadership, godly leadership in the church looks like. And you're not obeying this. There are things in the scriptures about how sin is to be dealt with. You are not doing that. You're acting like it doesn't matter. You're acting like God doesn't care. And I read my Bible and I don't see that that is the case. God does care. He's very serious about this. How can you even think that you can have a standard because your name is attached to this building and this thing that you're making, and you think that God doesn't care that his name is attached to this? He does. He said he would spit out anything that is lukewarm, and that is what he will do. And I told them, I'm going to obey God. These things do matter. And fellowship does matter. There were times in my life where I tried to talk to people who I grew up with about these things, to just say what God said about things and what had happened to me growing up and the changes in my life. And they would say, you're just bitter. You were hurt a few times growing up and it's just made you bitter and you think you need to live this way or that way just because you were hurt. I'm not hurt. I'm not bitter. I'm just saying Jesus said it doesn't have to be this way. I'm just telling you what Jesus said. And of course, I care and there were things that hurt, but that's not my motivation. Jesus said it doesn't have to be that way, and I believe him, and we have a responsibility to obey. And I'm free. I'm free. That's a big part. I'm not hurt and bitter. I'm free. I want you to be free. Sometimes the question has come up of whose fault is it that all those things happen in the religious world, that the things happened to me when I was a child? Whose fault is it? And on the one hand, I say I don't blame anybody in my upbringing. On the other hand, it is our fault because we can't lower the standard. When we read in our Bible what God says, we are expected to obey. And so not obeying God is our fault. And the other thing, though, that I look back at and say, this is another thing that is our fault, and that is when you turn a blind eye. I was doing things that were obvious. Sins are obvious. Even just showing up at religious services with a hangover, that's not that hard to figure out. People know what that looks like, and they don't say anything. No one said anything to me. I would have taken some help. I would have, but no one offered any. And I know that there were things going on. People know what alcohol smells like on breath, and they know the shifty eyes and the lying. You know, how many flat tires can a teenager have? You know, and they don't ask the questions, and people just let it go on generation after generation after generation. And that is wrong. That is someone's fault. We don't have to live that way, and God does not intend for us to live that way, and it could make a difference in people's lives. He does expect us as his people. He does expect us as the body of Christ, as a church, as people who say they belong to him. If you're going to wear Jesus' name, then he expects you to care and to do something about the lives around you. We are not supposed to turn a blind eye. There might not be a lot of things that you know the answers to. When I'm trying to help somebody, there's a lot of situations where I might not have the answers, but I don't turn a blind eye now. I don't. I look for answers and I try to help and I try to care, and that has made a very large difference in my life, and I will always do that. And we can always do that, whether we're part of a lampstand or not part of a lampstand. It is something that we can do. We can care. Some years later, and I don't know if I can even say why, but I went through a very difficult season of life where life just hurt. I just felt really sad, and life just seemed difficult. And probably because of those seeds that I planted a lot during childhood of not wanting to live, I started visiting some of those thoughts again. Not that I would ever take my life or anything like that, but that I just wanted to be done. I was just tired, and I just was asking God, I love you. Can I come home now? I just want to come home now. But I was really just whining, and in the pain, I would just cry and be somewhat pathetic, for lack of a better term. I would just cry and say, God, please just take me, just take me. Can I come home? Can I come home? Just kind of whine. And I didn't hear an audible voice, but I felt like it was very clear. I heard you. Okay, I heard you. And I perked up. I thought, great, I get to go home. I get to go home, I get to go home. And I had this spring in my step, and I thought, okay, what do I have to do to wrap it up? What do I have to do to sort of wrap life up? And I started viewing life differently. And I didn't know what was going to happen, but I thought, the end is coming soon. I don't know what it is, but he said he heard me. So, and I just started functioning as if my days were short. I started just kind of making a list in my mind or on paper even of what do I need to do? What do I need, And people would come to mind, okay, care for this, and this, you see this thing in this person's life, they still need some help with that, and you want to do this before you go, and you want to do that before you go, and don't forget about this person and your children and that, and I started seeing all these things, and I started working. I started spending energy on, I only have so many days left, so I need to make them count. And as I started doing that, I wanted to live. I wanted to live. And then I thought, it's too late. God said he's going to take me. And I started asking him, remember what I said? I'm really sorry. I really started seeing just the sin involved in that, just the lack of faith, the lack of hopefulness, and just that pathetic, whiny, I don't like the way something feels, or I hurt. All those things, I really started seeing them for what they were. It was an offense to God. It wasn't just that I was weak. It was an offense to God. He has put me here for a reason, and he wants me to live. And it is my job, it is my place to honor him and to actually choose life, to choose to live, to choose to give. And I wanted to. Something really changed in my heart when I realized that my days were numbered, and I started acting like my days were numbered. I all of a sudden wanted to live. And then I thought, but he's already made the decision. So I started asking him, please, can I live? Can I live? I really want to keep living. I will be the last man standing if you want me to be the last man standing. And since that time, I've really tried to hang on to that. And I'm still here. And I hope to be here for a really long time. And I will be the last man standing. So I like the idea that here I was, this little girl laying in bed at 12 years old, saying, please take me, please take me. I don't want to live, I just want to be close to you. To now, here I am, decades later, saying, God, I want to live. I want to be who you want me to be. And that's why I want to live. I'm not trying to get anything out of this life for myself. I don't care about anything as it relates to this life. But I'm here as yours. I'm here as an ambassador of yours on this planet. I'm here to help lead people to Jesus. And if I can do that, Father, I want to live. And I want to walk with you all the way. And I trust that you will dance me right up to the edge of eternity. And there we'll be together forever. And that is really awesome. But for now, I live. When we started working on capturing some of our testimonies on these videos, I was one of the people who got to actually sit and listen to a lot of people's testimonies. And I got to hear a lot of the teenagers and those who are young adults that now, where they were teenagers, and who had lived this dream that I had had, that these children would not have to fall into the sins that I fell into as a teenager, that they really could learn by revelation and not by fire, that they could be parented and that they could be mentored and that they could be apprentices and come up, and that we could grow together into the glory to glory to glory kind of life that God wanted, and that the church really could matter and be powerful in their lives. And I got to hear their testimonies, and I was seeing this has really happened. This is happening, and my dream is coming true. And I felt a little bit like Simeon in the temple when Mary and Joseph bring Jesus to Simeon, and he says, now that I've held him in my arms, my life can come to an end. And I was just for days, I was thinking that, now that I've held him in my arms, my life can come to an end. And then one morning I woke up with 2 words on my mind: finish it. Let's finish it. I remembered all the things that I thought when I first started seeing and hearing things of God as far as the plan that He had for the church to be something that was on display to the world, that the world would see the beauty of Jesus in His church. I remembered having that dream that Jesus' people would actually look like Him, and that would usher in His return. And then that finish it, that this job isn't finished yet, that Jesus actually wants to return for a bride that is ready, that actually looks like Him, that actually is a representative on this planet to all that Jesus is and does and wants for people. And I want to be a part of that. And so I'm not letting up until He has what He suffered for. He suffered and died, not just so that we could be forgiven of sins, but so that He could have something. He wants a bride. He wants a people. And I want to be a part of that. And I don't want to stop at anything less. As a child, I knew the gospel of the King. I knew the gospel of forgiveness, that Jesus was King and that He forgave my sins. I knew that, but I didn't know the gospel of the kingdom. I didn't know the good news, the gospel of forgiveness, and the gospel, the good news of the kingdom of God, the power of God that He plans in His church to have, that He plans to have this. And I'm really excited. That's all.